Welcome to Onslow County Today. I'm your host, Lisa Whitman-Grice, and we have some wonderful guests with us today. We'll be talking with Mark Kanellis from Onslow County Parks and Recreation about their fall programming. We'll also be visiting with Norm Bryson, Onslow County's Emergency Management Director, and we'll be talking about a couple of things: First Responders Appreciation Week, as well as weather preparations. As always, we thank you for joining us for Onslow County Today. Welcome back to Onslow County Today, and joining us now is Mark Kanellis with Onslow County Parks and Recreation. Mark, we're so glad to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
Now, I have to say that this is your first time with us because you're relatively new to Onslow County. When did you join Onslow County Parks?
I started in June this year.
Okay, so you've been through our summertime,
Right.
And here we are looking at fall. I have to say, we had a little bit of a conversation, and you are from upstate New York originally?
That's correct. Yeah.
I think you'll enjoy our winters maybe a little more.
Yeah, I think so. I'm planning on it.
Well, we're glad you're here, and we're here to talk about all of the cool things that are going on with Onslow County Parks and Recreation this fall. And the first thing we want to talk about is cheer and basketball. So let's talk about your cheer registration.
Yeah, there's a lot of fun things upcoming with our programs, and that starts with youth basketball and cheerleading. The registration is going to be Saturday, October 17th, from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. And that's boys and girls ages 7 through 19. So.
Okay, and when the kids come with their parents to register for any of your athletic programmings, what kind of documents, information do you need them to bring?
Yeah, for the athletic programs, they need a proof of age, so a copy of a birth certificate or something along those lines, and a $30 registration fee.
Okay, and no need for a physical form or anything like that?
Nope.
Okay, so a birth certificate, proof of age essentially.
Correct.
And then their registration fee.
Right.
All right. Can they do any of that in advance online?
We can do it after the fact, but we'd like them to try to do it on site.
Okay, so first on site. And again, let's tell folks where the location is.
Yeah, there's 5 different locations
Okay.
at each of the middle schools throughout the county. So.
Okay, so middle schools throughout the county. Saturday, October 17th, and the time one more time?
10 a.m. to 5 p.m.
So they've got all day,
Right.
because we're all busy running around on Saturdays. Bring proof of age,
Yep.
and they also need their registration fee.
Correct.
Okay, now we're all registered for cheer, we're all registered for basketball, and you've got something going on. You've got some clinics going on as well. When we get registered, you're going to even help us build our skill set even more. And what have you got going on then?
Yeah, that's right. Saturday, November 7th, we have a one-day cheer and basketball clinic. So that's kind of a one-day thing to boost fundamentals and kind of get the kids together to learn a few things.
You know what I've always enjoyed, with the cheer aspect of it, is that these students and all of your athletic programs, they start out as real itty bitties, and
Right.
this becomes a lifetime of healthy choices when we get our kids involved with youth athletics. Talk a little bit about what that means from a wellness standpoint and from kind of a socialization.
Yeah, absolutely. It obviously, it promotes healthy, exercise and wellness and those types of things, but also promotes the social aspect, meeting new people and gaining friends and those types of things as well.
And camaraderie and being part of a team.
Right, definitely competition, sportsmanship, the whole thing.
And all of that translates into their school life and eventually their work life. They carry these real attributes and qualities forward.
Yeah, absolutely. It helps build a well-rounded person, I think so.
So we've got cheer registration, basketball registration, cheer clinic, basketball clinic, and then with it being the fall, I know you guys have scheduled some really fun things. One of the things I know you've got going on is a City to the Sea bike ride.
Yeah, it's a 21-mile bike ride. You know, it's pretty low key, but it's fun. You know, to ride around and check out the sights and those things.
Fortunately, we don't have a whole lot of elevation change.
That's right.
So it just makes for a really nice scenic
Right,
ride.
exactly.
That 21 mile. But I know that folks, that's something you all do every year.
Right.
And that's a beautiful time of year to be riding out to Hammock's Beach as
Right,
well.
absolutely.
And so then I know that we've got some pumpkin events going on, and I know a lot of fun that they have. All the kids get to paint a pumpkin and take a pumpkin home.
Yep, yeah, absolutely. We got a lot of seasonal recreation programs they're fun for the holidays and Halloween and those types of things.
So pumpkins, bike riding, clinics, and with early release days, you guys have some art activities scheduled for, I think, the 21st.
Yep, we have Make It and Take It Art, which is another fun program, you know, on the early release days to come and be creative and take your work home with you.
Awesome. And then we've also got, which I think is a beautiful idea. You know, people who watch the Onslow County Today program or who know me know that my love for Onslow County waterways. And you guys are doing something which I think is so beautiful. You're doing a Moonlight kayak trip?
Yep, yeah, so I think it's, you know, nice and peaceful, and like you said, you know, take advantage of all the things in our surrounding areas, and kayaking is a big part of that, and you know, it's a cool, different type of thing doing it at night, and it's a pretty exciting event, I think.
And when is that going to be?
That's going to be on Saturday, October 24th.
Okay, so just that whole idea, we should be cycling back around to a really beautiful moon cycle by then, and just get out and paddle, and it's going to be just beautiful. I'm excited about that.
Yeah, it should be fun.
And we're shifting gears a little bit because we've talked a lot about things for kids or for families, and you also have coming up then in November a fall event for your seniors.
Right. Yeah. That's a fun event for the seniors on November 8th. You know, a bunch of different things: shuffleboard, horseshoes, and those fun games.
Are they going to play pickleball? Probably. They love
yeah,
pickleball.
probably. It's an up and coming event. So.
Well, you know, you guys do so much, and we're not going to, you know, certainly go into detail about every event that you're doing, but we do want to give folks your contact information and your website. So start with your telephone number.
Yeah, it's 910-347-5332.
Okay, and of course your website?
Yep, it's onslowcountync.gov/parks.
Well, Mark, we are so glad that you've been able to come in and share with us some of your fall activities, especially your cheer registration that's coming up and your basketball registration that's coming up. No folks can go to your website. And we are so glad that you've joined us here in Onslow County.
Absolutely, it's been great being here so far.
All right, we look forward to visiting with you next time.
All right, thank you.
Welcome back to Onslow County Today, and you might have noticed that we've changed location just a little bit. We're visiting with Norman Bryson, Onslow County's Emergency Management Director here at the Onslow County Emergency Operations Center. Norman, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, Lisa. It's good to have you here.
Well, I tell you what, we've visited many times. You and I have worked together in this very building where we are today under all kinds of weather event circumstances. And so we're going to spend today kind of talking about two different subjects. We first want to talk about First Responders Week and the appreciation program we're putting together here in the county. And then we want to talk about weather. And so let's begin though on the note about first responders. And next week, beginning October the 12th through the 16th, we will be having First Responders Appreciation Week here in the county. Talk to us a little bit about what that means when I say first responders. Who all does that encompass?
Well, first responders is a very generic word. As you're looking at your first responders, those are going to be law enforcement officials, E911, EMS, fire departments, and it doesn't matter if it's paid or volunteer, and rescue squads as well. So all of those individuals are encompassed into what's called a first responder.
Now, even at the very beginning, at the very kind of the first point of contact with any event, is also your dispatchers, your 911 folks as well.
Absolutely. Our dispatchers are typically 99% of the time where an incident starts. We receive a 911 call, and Onslow County in 2014, we had 188,000 phone calls that came into our 911 center. And that's almost like the citizens of almost every citizen in Onslow County picking up the phone and calling the 911 center. Now, some of those are non-emergent, some of those are emergent. Occasionally, we'll get the child that will call in that dialed 911 by accident, and we have to try to get the parent back to the phone. And sometimes they even are testing 911 with the children to let them know how to use the phone system. But, those dispatchers that we have are our very front line. They're not seen in the public much like law enforcement and the ambulances are. However, they're very important to us in what they do.
Well, as you said, that is the first point of contact. As we kind of go through each of those facets, each of those aspects of first responders, the one thing I want us to kind of circle back to is how they each work in tandem. No one is a silo. Each of those agencies, from my observations, are very much about the team.
Correct, and everything that we do is a teamwork. While everyone has their own mission and direction that they're going, the direction has to be pretty much the same. We all have different functions. Our 911 center is there to receive the call from the citizens, and then they turn around and dispatch out the appropriate agencies. In turn, and we'll use a structure fire.
Right.
They will dispatch out the fire department. The fire department goes to the structure fire. Well, they're also dispatching EMS as well as the volunteer rescue squads to go and provide medical standby or to take care of any injuries. Law enforcement is also going out to help direct traffic. There's also a possible investigation that may have to occur around the fire depending on the circumstances. So there you have all of those entities are coming together to assist. And the same thing goes on. It doesn't matter if it's a wreck or what it may be. Typically, you have more than one entity that is responding, especially if it is an emergent situation.
All right. Well, when we think about that team aspect, that camaraderie, and we begin with your 911 call center. We had the opportunity just before we came on camera, you took me back to the center, and to see that kind of hub of information. Talk a little bit about your 911 team to kick off and the real dynamic that goes on there.
Well, our telecommunicators go through a 4 certification process. It is emergency medical dispatching, emergency fire dispatching, emergency police dispatching, and also North Carolina telecommunications certification. The first 3 certifications are called protocol certifications that we use for asking questions of the public and determining what's emergent call, how do we need to respond, which call is going to come before the other one. Because we always want to make sure someone who's having a heart attack will get an ambulance over someone who has just a broken arm. While both of them may have a need, the one with the heart attack is the more dire and the more emergent of the situations. So, our dispatchers, we have at least 6 on shift. Each one of them has a supervisor. And if you ever came into the dispatch center and actually watched, you may have times where there's not much going on. We're getting a few phone calls here and there. However, you have a wreck at an intersection, and we'll use an example, Western Boulevard and 17. You may have 20 people trying to reach 911 at that one point in time because they all have a different viewpoint and someone's trying to make sure that they get the appropriate agencies responding. So that in itself brings up the stress level when you have lots of calls coming in. At the same time, we're also trying to dispatch out the appropriate agencies and make, as I said earlier, make sure they respond appropriate. And I keep bringing that up because for us, Onslow County is a very large place. And we typically, as far as ambulances, and I'm going to use them as the example, have generally 8 that work from 6A to 6P and another one that comes in as a swing truck at 10 o'clock in the morning. So let's say we're in the peak call point, that's 9 ambulances that we may have operational, but it's still a very large area we have to cover. if I have to send an ambulance, emergency traffic to every call we have, it increases the chances of us having a wreck or being involved with the incident. So the more incidents that we can send an ambulance non-emergent, we cut down on the risk to our responders.
Well, you mentioned how important it was for them to get all of the correct information and kind of distill all that information very quickly so that they make the right decision, so that they're following those correct protocols. Sometimes perhaps a citizen may be a little bit concerned or a little bit disconcerted, if you will, when they feel like, why am I answering all these questions? I need you right now. But explain how important it is for them to really just stop for a minute and realize that the 911, the telecommunicator, is really working in their best interest.
Well, first thing we have to realize is no one calls 911 because they're having a really good day.
Right.
So typically they're having some form of emergency in their own life, it may be, or it may be a very real large event. So they're dialing 911, and when they're starting to get these questions, if they're very flustered, if they're very scared, these questions, they just want someone to come. Well, number one, we have to find out who needs to be the appropriate entity. Do I need to send the fire department? Do I need to send an ambulance? Do I need to send law enforcement? Or do I need to send everyone? So the first thing is to find out the who. Who do we need to send to you to make sure we're appropriately handling this? And also make sure we're not pulling away from somewhere else when we need to. So yes, they feel like the questions are very burdensome to them, but for us, it's making sure we get the appropriate response. Now, while you're answering these questions, we're not waiting to the end of the questions to send out agencies. We are having them already being dispatched. As we get additional information, we're providing them as well. So we want those units rolling as fast as we can, especially to the high priority calls.
And that goes right back to that same idea of everything is happening in tandem. Everything is happening
That's correct.
At once. So let's move on. We've talked a little bit about 911. Then we want to talk about your folks who are your EMTs and who work on rescue vehicles. Talk a little bit about that team. We've had the great pleasure to work with Beth Himes from your office and actually get a behind-the-scenes tour several years ago. Talk a little bit about that team, that division.
Well, I've got two separate field staffs. The first one is EMS, Onslow County EMS, which is our ambulances, our advanced life support system, ALS ambulances for the paramedics that we have, that we put out in the field. And I was saying earlier, of course, we have 8 trucks that we put on in the daytime. We have 1 at 10 to 10, and we do 7 at night because the call volume goes down at nighttime. So we have less ambulances on in the evening than we do during the day. But EMS is our largest division we have in the Department of Emergency Services, and they're very key. We provide EMS countywide. We are supported by volunteer rescue squads, which we have 4 independent volunteer rescue squads that do EMS and rescue, and then we have an additional 2 that do EMS rescue and fire, and then we have additional one that fire department that just does rescue. So there's a conglomeration around the county, and when you're talking about EMS, those volunteer agencies are in support of the county system. Now, we're going to talk about fire in a little bit, and it's just the opposite. The county personnel are in support of the volunteer fire system.
Very good.
But for EMS, the EMS is primary. We have the units out there, which we spend a great deal of time on making sure our personnel are trained. We make sure that they're trained to some of the most newest standards that we have out there. Onslow County has actually won several awards for their response to cardiac arrest. It's national awards that we've been recognized for, and we're very proud of that. We have a lot of personnel that are very dedicated, and the biggest thing that people also don't see for our people is the stress on them. And you know what? That it doesn't matter whether it's a volunteer or paid person, that stress is the same and just as real to each and all of them. So the appreciation that we give for all of them is very high and very important to them in the recognition.
When the folks that they are responding to don't often have the opportunity necessarily to know who has saved their life. And so this is really an opportunity for we as a county, as a whole body, to say thank you on behalf of the individual or the family for that work, for that devotion and commitment that you talked about. Let's jump to that next tier then, and those are the firefighters. And you and I know, we've had this conversation many times, how near and dear those folks are to me. That is, my grandfather was a firefighter, so I just am always in awe, because the one thing, you know, that we hear is when everyone else is running out of a building, these are the folks who run in.
They're running in.
Talk about them.
Well, our firefighters, Onslow County is covered by 19 volunteer fire departments that we contract with. Now, we're not including some of the municipal departments because it's upon the municipal department to provide fire protection for them as well. Now,
Right.
there are a couple municipalities that we contract with to provide fire protection in the unincorporated counties, areas of the county. With those people, you know, they're volunteer. The county has brought in, I think we're up to 46 paid staff to support them. And that support comes in from Monday through Friday from 6A to 6P. That personnel is called emergency responders. We have a generic term that we've applied to them because they're not just in the volunteer fire departments, they're also in the volunteer rescue squads. But this is a great deal of people in this county that has a lot of heart to try to provide back to the citizens. And if we look at numbers, true numbers of the volunteer firefighters we have, collectively we have around 640 in Onslow County today of these volunteer firefighters. Well, if you look several years ago, and back around 2008, we had 850. We're actually seeing a decline in the number of volunteers that we actually have, and that's one reason why the county has brought in the support staff. Now, each of these volunteer fire departments are private nonprofits. They're their own corporations. We contract with them directly, so the county does not have direct control over their operations. But as I said, you know, our purpose is to support them. In Onslow County, I think in 2014, there was 324 structure fires in the county. And there again, that's over that 640 people that we're talking about that are out there trying to respond to those. And anytime we have a structure fire, we don't send just one department. On average, we're sending at least 3 to 4 fire departments for every structure fire. Now, if it's a commercial fire or a school, then we're probably sending 5 or 6 off the initial alarm out that response. But these are people that are not receiving anything, any compensation. They are out there serving the citizens of the county. And, you know, if you look at 193,000 people and only 640 are volunteering to help provide that service.
You know, and we think about not only 193,000 people, but all of the homes that those people live in, and the variation of homes, from a mobile home to multi-family dwellings, apartments to single homes. The amount of training your firefighters must undergo is probably exponential.
Well, the state has standards on what a firefighter has to have on training. They have to have a minimum of 36 hours a year of training. Now, the training can be, is what's considered by the chief of the agency. Now, mind you, I want you to understand, going and picking up the push broom and sweeping the floor does not count as training. I mean, it's actual with the air pack, working with the equipment, the assets that they have. And if you are a, standard citizen who I'm trying to pay for my home, I have a family, my children are getting older and they have ball games, they're cheerleading, whatever it may be that you're going out and supporting them, it is hard for people to volunteer.
Oh my gosh.
It takes a lot of time away, and then you have to have this training, and the training is not all. That department is its own corporation and business. They have to have business meetings as well. There has to be time, not when you're just out there just for training, that trucks have to be checked off. And all of that also pulls back into insurance ratings, because that's another benefit of the volunteer fire departments is while they're there to help with the fire protection, they also are there to help with insurance ratings. And those insurance ratings could be considerable if you're looking for an area that's a class 10, which has basically no rated fire district, versus an area that's a class 6, you could be talking paying double for your homeowner's insurance. So if you were paying $1,300 a year for homeowners premiums, you could be paying $2,600 a year if you were a Class 10.
And as you said, these are volunteers, so they're not out there as, again, they're training, they're keeping the equipment upgraded, they're keeping the equipment in great repair, and they oftentimes have to do a lot of fundraising to support their efforts as well.
And all that time, you know what we haven't talked about? We haven't talked about responding to the call, because all of the things that we just talked about are support of responding to that call and the amount of hours, and that comes in at 2 o'clock in the morning. It doesn't matter what the conditions are outside, whether it's hot, it's too cold, either way, or it's just heavy rain, they're still responding.
They don't stay inside, as you say, just because
the weather's a little bad.
Or they've had a long day.
Right.
And you know, within my own community of Richlands, when I've seen those folks respond, they're right back up the next day. They're going to work, they're going to school, they're in the community, and they don't stop. And they don't stop. The last piece of the puzzle, which I know is not under your direction, but you work in tandem with, is law enforcement. Is our final group of kind of first responders, again, working all together. Talk a little bit about working in tandem with that agency.
Well, law enforcement, in Onslow County, we've got the Sheriff's Office. We also have 5 municipalities in the county. 4 of those 5 we dispatch directly for. The city of Jacksonville does their own dispatching for their own police department. But we still have to work in coordination. You know, all these boundaries we talk about, all these law enforcement agencies, it doesn't mean a crime can't happen in one area and other parts of that crime, you know, someone's driving through and they're caught into another area. So, and we'll use a vehicle chase. Let's say we have a vehicle chase that starts in Holly Ridge. So a Holly Ridge Police Department in their district calls in our dispatch center and says, we're chasing a vehicle. This is the description of a vehicle. And now all of a sudden they're in the county. So now we're having to get the Sheriff's Office. We're having to make contact with the Highway Patrol and bring them about. Maybe this person drives into the city of Jacksonville, so now we have to contact the city of Jacksonville. So we have to coordinate between the dispatch centers and all those agencies this chase. And we use this as an example, but it's very key and essential. There are direct things that we do in Department of Emergency Services that are in conjunction with the Onslow County Sheriff's Office. We've got a joint dive team, swiftwater team, that we work on as far as specialty rescues. We also work with them when it comes to investigation of structure fires. While my office, we have the county fire marshal, and we do the cause and origin is for the sheriff's office to deal with developing who the suspect and creating the arrest. So all of this, it has to be in conjunction together. We need those law enforcement pieces. As we talked earlier, it may be a traffic accident, it could be a structure fire where they are actually directing traffic for us. We have actually had sheriff's deputies that have gone into burning houses to help pull people out before, because they're on the road. The volunteers are maybe at home. It maybe take a few minutes. If they can get there early, they may be able to help save a life. So you can't operate in a vacuum. It doesn't matter what your functional area is between fire, law enforcement, even emergency management. You have to work together with your other agencies.
Well, you know, what I've observed and what I'm hearing is really it's just that one umbrella and that one, as you said, you each have your own mission, but the ultimate mission is for the preservation and public safety of human lives here in Onslow County. And next week, as I said, we are having First Responders Appreciation Week, because it seems like just a simple thing to say thank you, but certainly what your first responders and the teams of first responders are doing merits so much more than just a simple thank you.
And collectively, if we take all of these different areas, it's about 1,400 people who we have that are protecting the citizens of Onslow County. I mean, that's still a very small number when you start looking at the population. We're talking about less than 1% of the population is protecting the rest of the population. And you know, for myself, I started out as a volunteer 25 years ago. Matter of fact, it was 25 years ago this week.
Wow. That
I started out as a volunteer and have been able to move up over the time periods into the position I'm at today. And while I don't get in the field as much as I used to, I mean, the admiration to the people who are out there doing it every day. and what they see and what they deal with. I appreciate them and what they do.
You know, I want to go back to what you said about starting out as a volunteer. What we're seeing a little bit more of, which is really terrific to see, are young people expressing an interest in all of these fields. I know you all do a special summer camp every year, introducing students to this notion of pursuing this as a career. Because you all don't do it for the thank you. I mean, we're taking the time next week and we're saying how much we appreciate your efforts. But that's not why you all get into it, is it?
No, it's not. It's not. Some people call it a sense, a calling. Some people are just wanting to help the community. And it's working together. And there's also a camaraderie that goes along with it as well, that you build with your fellow firefighters and your first responders. And it's working together. And if you're doing it just going out, if you're doing it for glory, you're in it for the wrong reason.
What is it when you share that with young people, when you have your summer camp, or when you have an opportunity to express that calling on your own life to be a public servant, to be a first responder? What do you share with them?
You know, one of the first things I talk about in my own life is back in the 1980s, my family's home was destroyed by a tornado back in 1984. And during that time, the home was destroyed by a tornado. We were farmers. We had a warehouse that was destroyed by fire. We had been hit multiple times by hurricanes. My father got into emergency management as well. Mm-hmm. And I followed that path that he's put before me because I really enjoyed what I saw him do. And I've had some very great benefits in my own life where I've seen direct benefit in helping someone. Mm-hmm. And that feels really, really good when you've got that opportunity that you know you did something, and maybe you weren't the only one, the first one, but you as a team saved someone's life, or you've been able to create something and put in place as a program that's going to help people for years. And that is a great benefit. And you talk about the summer camp, and the summer camp, we do it also to entice people to look at young kids, because it's from 14 to 18, to maybe look at this as a career. But we're also looking at is maybe they don't want to go this as a career path, but they can volunteer and help their community as well. And we have seen a few kids come back to us from this. So it's been very beneficial.
You're planting those seeds. You know, we've taken a good bit of time to talk about those teams, to talk about that camaraderie. And again, we want to go back that we're doing this program as really a big thank you note, an opportunity to say thank you. And as we kind of close out this portion of our conversation, what would you remind our citizens? What are ways that perhaps, even if our life has not been touched by the efforts, the hard work of a first responder, what can we do to just express that gratitude?
Well, any of your volunteer agencies need support. I mean, they need support. Sometimes that support could be they're on a scene and need a cup of coffee or a drink or something, and we have seen that. I want to give you an example. You know, you've asked me what can they do, mm-hmm. but I want to give you an example. In 2011, Onslow County had a tornado that came through it. We had 4,000 spontaneous volunteers that came out to help clean up and support the volunteers that we already have out there. Now, mind you, that's a lot of people, and we want to be able to manage that number of people orderly when we got an event like that. Mm-hmm. But, you know, they came out and supported, and they helped, and they donated. And that is a great thing, especially when we as a community are suffering from a disaster. But, you know, supporting those local volunteers, or maybe it's even the paid staff, they themselves want to hear good stories where they have affected or touched someone, because we do deal with a lot of bad every day. And I don't think people really, they don't see what we see. Mm-hmm. But, you know, if you've had a place where one of these professional paid or professional volunteer people have done something to benefit you, let them know.
Let them know. I think that's a perfect ending note. Just let them know how much we appreciate their efforts. Now we want to shift gears, because you and I were scheduled to have a conversation a week ago?
No, about a week ago.
And it got intercepted, our conversation, because, again, we were preparing. And let's talk a little bit about Hurricane Joaquin. What kind of made it a real I feel like I say this all the time, but what made this one different, but also how we were prepared and how Onslow County was affected, and how this is one more lesson that goes into our big book of knowledge about weather events.
Well, let's start in the beginning of Joaquin. Joaquin, we had been watching for actually a couple weeks. It had been out in the Atlantic. It stayed as a low depression. It even circled upon itself a couple of times, and then finally developed into a named storm, a tropical system. As we started watching it, then all of a sudden it started looking to develop into a hurricane. National Weather Service started providing briefs and information back up to us. Now, mind you, it was at this time several days out. And, we kept on watching where it was going to go, the Cone, and there were some times that it looked like Joaquin was going to actually come and visit us.
Right.
Come very close to our coastline, if not directly impact our coastline, is some of the verbiage that was used with us. Of course, in that point, we have to start making our preparations. We start making notifications out to our government, our emergency partners, and then on to the citizens, because we have to be prepared for this. And one of the things, time is always funny when you're dealing with tropical systems. And I'm going to say this because there's a lot of times people want as much notification as you can possibly get. These storms are very unpredictable, and I talk about weather prediction. While weather forecasting is a science, it is still not an exact science, and there's a lot of probability it has to be taken into it. If you look at Hurricane Fran that affected Onslow County in 1996, 36 hours before Fran hit Onslow County, it was predicted to actually strike Charleston, South Carolina. So you're talking about in a 36 time frame, a prediction came out, and 36 hours later it struck somewhere else, hundreds of miles up the coastline. So these storms are very unpredictable, and that's the same thing we did with Joaquin. Now, Joaquin brought with it another issue. We had a coastal low that was coming across, and Joaquin being out off our coastline, while it got pushed out by the coastal low stayed over us. And we have seen the rain events, which was almost a nor'easter type event that actually sat over North and South Carolina, which fortunately for Onslow, we did not get very bad effects. Unfortunately, South Carolina did.
Well, you talk about this art and science of prediction, and we all watch the weather and we all see those spaghetti models, which is the best description of anything I've ever heard, because that's exactly what it appears to be. And the way in which Joaquin elevated so quickly from tropical depression to a Cat 1, then over the Bahamas a Cat 4, and then somehow skirted in between Bermuda and the North Carolina coastline, right up the center, just bisected that area. But as you said, there were two other weather systems. There was the low from Canada. There was this low that created what they referred to as that fire hose effect that brought in 14, 18, 20 plus inches of rain. And we were all watching, and we were all waiting. But you all were doing something beyond watching and waiting. You were preparing, as you always do, getting the word out and preparing the county for what could be a pretty devastating event. Talk a little bit about, Norman, what you all do behind the scenes to get things ready.
Well, because Onslow County is not unfamiliar to hurricanes, we have a lot of plans that are already in place for our actions and what we should be doing. One thing that we did early Friday morning was have what we call an emergency partners meeting. That emergency partner meeting is our county department heads. It is the power companies, the water companies, the hospitals, the Marine Corps bases at both Camp Lejeune as well as New River, American Red Cross, United Way, all of these volunteer agencies, professional agencies coming together, and we had discussions about what are predictions, what are our preparations, because we were already receiving rain at that point in time. We were already starting to hear from other partners some effects that we may see that allows us to continue our preparation, and maybe we have to change in another area. So we knew Friday one of two things. We knew at the minimum that we were going to see a lot of rain, but we did not know how much, but we did know upward of probably 8 inches. We also knew that we were going to see heavy wave action on our coastline, and anything that was tidal would be affected by it. And we knew it was going to at least be 8 foot or more in that wave action. And I'm not sure to call it storm surge,
Right.
because the storm never came directly at us, but the storm did cause a heavy wave action with it.
So there was a great deal affected by tidal
Right.
effects.
But those were the two knowns.
Mm-hmm.
Then there's a lot of unknown. Is the storm going to come directly at us, and will it be storm surge? Will we be seeing winds in excess of 35, 40 miles an hour, or will we be even seeing hurricane force winds? So those were the unknown factors. And in eastern North Carolina, and this is a Floyd lesson, we know if you receive a lot of rain beforehand before you receive a hurricane, it loosens the roots on the trees, it loosens the ground around power poles. In the ground itself, you could even see dam failures, collapses, mudslides from them because of the amount of rain that you're having.
The other thing that I saw you all doing in your preparations were messaging,
Yes.
reminding our public that no, we may not take a direct hit, but here's what you can do to ensure your own safety. As we do that, preparation is really for you, for your team, but really should also be for the citizens. Not something we do last minute, but that we're always top of mind. Talk a little bit about what families can do, because as we're transitioning from hurricane season, we'll then be facing winter weather events possibly. Talk just a little bit about the need for preparation, not just on the behalf of the government, not on behalf of response agencies, but the citizens themselves.
Well, Lisa, you know that you and I over the years have done several episodes talking to the public about preparation. And that message hasn't changed. I believe we've been doing it for almost 10 years now, to be honest with you.
Yes.
That message hasn't changed. And it's not a hurricane preparedness kit, it's not a winter weather preparedness kit, it's an all-hazard preparedness kit. And we can talk about items that you need to have in the kit. And some of those things are always clothes, non-perishable foods, water. And when we talk about water, it should be a gallon a person per day. So if you have 3 or 4 people, you need to calculate for the number of people that you have in the home. We also talk about preparation of such things as documentation that you need in case you need to go and make an insurance claim, and make sure you have all your documentation with you. We even talk about having cash on hand, because if power is out, how will you make a ATM transaction if there's no power? So if you still have to buy goods afterwards, or maybe some stores open, cash on hand is always a good thing to have. Batteries, flashlights, all hazards, weather radio, even candles. We always caution people to be careful using the candles, but you can have candles in case we lose lighting. But those are the internal things in the kit. There's other things that you have to think about. You have to think about your home, your windows. Do I need to board up my windows? What am I going to do with my animals? Do I want to put a generator on my home? What about the things that I have out in my yard that I need to pick up and make sure that can't fly around? Because even
projectile.
Even the standard 2x4 can actually lift off the ground and fly at 80 mile an hour sustained winds. So that becomes a projectile at that point in time. So there's all those things that you have to talk about, think about. And of course, we don't want to forget medications. Right. If you have someone in your in your family that is special needs and has medications, having additional medications on hand to take care of them as well. And then there's the plan. There's all these things and items you can get. There comes another piece to the plan. Am I going to shelter in place, or am I going to leave? And you need to take that in consideration. Am I going to stay here, or am I going to go? Now, we in Onslow County have been beating around discussion over Cat 4 and Cat 5 hurricanes. And I'm going to knock on a little wood and hope we never see any.
Right.
But, that chance of another Hazel coming through has a potential one day. And, we ourselves may not even open shelters here in a Category 4, Category 5. So leaving the area is something people need to have in their thoughts and preparation, or whether they need to stay here or not. And one thing we will add in, especially since we've seen the heavy rain event, is you're leaving the area, don't pick up a motel that has the name of a creek. because there is probably a creek close by, and if it floods, your car may be floating down the river tomorrow morning. So be careful where you pick where you go as well, and that's a key piece.
You know, and that's one of the things that always surprises people. We saw this with Fran, we saw this with Floyd, we saw it just with a serious storm in October several years ago, and then with Joaquin, is I don't know that people always realize how much water is really in Onslow County. But to look at a map just one time with the New River, the White Oak River, and all of its tributaries really is like looking at almost human anatomy with veins running all through it. If you look at that map, there's blue or green everywhere in Onslow County.
Well, there's also a couple other effects. Now, Onslow County is unique to one thing. We're one of the few counties in the United States that has a river that stops and starts in our county. That's beneficial, that it means we will drain quick because our drain is out into the ocean. However, there's also something else that we have to look at. There are other tributaries, Neuse and Cape Fear River basins, that are inland behind us. And even after Floyd, we saw situations where I-40 was cut off for 2 weeks after Floyd. Goldsboro and Lenoir County and Kinston were all cut off because of the Neuse River. So you have to also take into account, you may leave, you may not immediately get back, but there's a lot of hazard. If you decide to stay, there is a lot of hazards that you may face here, and a lot of resources that you may not have on hand that we can't get to you immediately as well, depending on the size and strength of the storm. So initially, as we have a storm come in, we can see a lot of flooding because of all those tributaries and veins that you see. We can drain quickly, but it doesn't mean behind us drains quickly, which means the outside world resources coming to us are not coming that fast as well.
Well, as we kind of close out this segment, and people are looking forward to, I've got 6 more weeks, and then officially, I usually call you on the last day of hurricane season and say, "Phew, we're done for this year." But what were some takeaways from Joaquin? Because it was kind of a different in nature. We had these 3 systems, and it was a very different in characteristic type storm.
It was, and it was one of those situations where we had to spend a lot of time with the National Weather Service. Now, the National Weather Service typically has 3 or 4 conference calls a day when a storm like this is coming. I spent additional time making additional phone calls during this storm because we were seeing different weather patterns. We had some times where the weather would seem to be almost constantly changing by hour of what that prediction was going to be, and trying to stay ahead of it and trying to make sure we're making some of the best decisions and the right decisions. And even from the National Weather Service, I'll give them credit. I mean, they've stayed on top of it. Some of these predictions are very hard in themselves. So for us, some of the additional takeaways from Joaquin, we in ourselves are also looking at doing sheltering a little bit different. We didn't have to open shelters, but we are going to be doing some sheltering a little bit different than what we have done in the past because of this. We are also planning a couple additional exercises, call down list with emergency partners, which are tests to see. We're also going to be developing some other additional plans, some evacuation plans. Now, before Joaquin came along, I had been working with the state of North Carolina on a plan that they have, which is the Coastal Regional Evacuation Plan. And that's, there again, I want to go back to that 4 or 5 event if we have to move a large body of population inland. So this Joaquin is going to help us to further move that and have those discussions of what may happen, because this isn't just a hurricane. What happened in South Carolina was not Hurricane Joaquin.
No.
And as I refer to this, I typically call this Joaquin/nor'easter because that rain event, it doesn't have to be 80 and 90 mile an hour wind event coming along with it. It could be a large amount of rain. Now in Onslow County, our time periods where we've seen this, we had 99 when Floyd came in. But in 2010, we saw the remnants of Nicole, which we saw mass flooding. The highest amount was around 21 inches of rain. Up Bear Creek, Hubert, Belgrade, Swansboro community saw the highest amounts of rain of anywhere, and they had the worst effects. So when we start talking about hurricanes, we start talking about storm surge. Don't associate storm surge or tidal surge with necessarily the category of the hurricane. You can still see those effects you can still see, and it is not dependent upon the level of the category of what your storm effects can be. Lisa, we've got a picture behind us with a couple examples, and I use this picture a lot of times in presentations. And the one thing I ask people is, what's the biggest theme in this picture? And they always say water, because 3 of the 4 pictures are water events, a flooded roadway, a flooded community, storm surge at the beach, and then the final one is a tree coming down on a house. So all of these effects, but water is our biggest effect. And whether it's storm surge, tidal, wave action, or falling rain and floodwaters, all of that can affect us.
Well, as we're closing out and we look at that, I think there's another common denominator that we have here in Onslow County, and it really brings our conversation full circle. We talk about being prepared, but we also talk about having the best first responders to each of these events. And as we close out our conversation about weather events, it brings to mind that all of the teams that we talked about in the earlier part of our conversation are there.
Yes, they are all there in this, and all those partners, the first responders that are out there, but we also don't want to forget our emergency partners that are with us in all of this as well. But yes, it brings back to our first responders that we talked about in the earlier part of the program, because they're out there. They're in this, and they're out there for the citizens.
Well, Norman Bryson, that's a perfect ending to our conversation. I thank you for taking your time today, for opening the doors of the EEOC and letting us share this time with you, and we look forward to our next conversation.
Thank you, Lisa.
As always, we want to thank you for joining us for Onslow County Today, and a special thank you to our guest, Mark Kanellis, and to Norm Bryson for opening up the Emergency Operations Center for us today to have a conversation about First Responders Week and about weather preparations. We thank you as always for joining us for Onslow County Today and invite you to get out and explore your Onslow County.